Welcome, everyone, to today's deep dive. I'm honestly so glad you could join us today because we're looking at a stack of materials that fundamentally changes how you see the map of the world.
It really does. It's a completely different perspective.
Yeah, we're pulling from this fascinating set of AP human geography notes, and they focus on, quote, the global urban hierarchy, world cities and connectivity. Our mission today is to discover exactly why certain cities act as the absolute engines of the entire globe.
Right.
We're going to explore why a city's actual power on the world stage has surprisingly very little to do with how many people happen to live inside its borders.
It's a profound shift in perspective when you stop looking at cities just as, places where people reside, and you start seeing them as critical nodes, almost like neurons in a giant global brain. It completely changes how you view your daily life.
I love that analogy, a giant global brain.
Exactly, because every product you buy, every piece of media you consume, and every major political decision affecting you is being routed through this hidden architecture of global connectivity.
The hidden architecture. That is exactly what we're going to uncover for you today. Now, just a quick ground rule before we jump in.
Always good to set the stage.
Our source material today covers some pretty heavy global impacts. Everything from massive wealth concentration to high-level political influence and shifting socioeconomic realities. Our goal here today is purely to unpack the facts and the frameworks provided in these geography notes. We are going to impartially explore how these urban centers function and the systemic outcomes of that functioning. Without taking any sides, we are just here to understand the machinery.
And understanding that system requires looking at all of its outcomes, both the remarkable efficiencies and the localized vulnerabilities, with a purely analytical lens. We're just looking at the mechanics of globalization, plain and simple.
Okay, let's unpack this. The biggest misconception about global cities is this assumed difference between size and power. We naturally tend to think that the biggest cities in the world dictate how the world runs. But the sources make a really sharp distinction here between sheer size and actual influence.
Let's define our terms to make that clear, because the materials draw a very hard line between megacities, metacities, and what are known as world cities.
Right.
So a megacity is an urban area with over 10 million people. A metacity is even larger, like a massive, sprawling urban region with over 20 million residents.
Which is just a massive amount of people.
It is, but those terms are purely demographic measures. They're just head counts. You can have 25 million people living in an area, but that doesn't automatically mean that city is steering the global economy.
Yeah.
A world city, on the other hand, sits at the absolute highest tier of the global urban hierarchy because of its disproportionate impact on worldwide politics, culture, and economics.
So if it's not about population, how does a city with a relatively smaller headcount end up calling the shots? The example in the notes that really blew my mind was New York City.
New York is the ultimate test case for this concept. If you just go by the numbers, New York shouldn't run the world. It has a population of under 9 million people. On a global scale, it doesn't even qualify for the highest population tiers.
Right, it's not a metacity.
Exactly. There are cities out there with far, far more people. Yet, New York City is considered a premier world city at the absolute pinnacle of the hierarchy.
How does it pull that off, though? What makes those 9 million people so much more globally influential than 20 million people somewhere else?
It comes down to functioning as a command and control center. World cities serve as the control centers for the rest of the urban hierarchy beneath them.
Okay.
Think about what is physically located within New York's city limits. It houses the United Nations, which gives it unparalleled political influence on a global scale.
Right. Global diplomacy happening right there.
Exactly. And at the same time, it's home to the New York Stock Exchange, making it a supreme center of financial influence.
Yeah.
The sheer volume of international decisions made within those few square miles dictates the flow of capital and diplomatic relations around the entire globe.
It's literally the steering wheel of the global economy and international politics.
Right.
And significant movements in economics or even entertainment typically originate in these specific command centers before they diffuse out to the rest of the world.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, New York isn't acting alone. The urban hierarchy relies on a network of these top-tier peers. You have London and Paris.
The European hubs?
Right, which serve as the major European hubs for both finance and culture. Then, looking toward Asia, you have Tokyo, which functions as a massive global center for trade and technological infrastructure. And Shanghai operates as a critical node in the East Asian economic landscape. These cities are the pillars holding up the globalized system.
That leads to a really natural follow-up question. How exactly do these specific cities physically and digitally control the globe? I mean, we know they have the stock exchanges and the political headquarters, but how does a decision made in London or Tokyo actually reach you and me?
That's the real question.
The source material breaks this down into three primary drivers of global connectivity. Let's start with the physical reality of it. Driver number one, transportation networks.
World cities act as the global hubs that physically link different regions. We are talking about the actual physical movement of goods and people across the planet.
And the scale of this is just hard to wrap your head around. I was looking at the notes on maritime trade, and they specifically highlight Tokyo's port of Nagoya.
The Port of Nagoya is a staggering example of physical connectivity. This single port handles between 100 to 200 million metric tons of freight annually.
Wow, 200 million.
To visualize what 200 million metric tons actually looks like, you have to picture endless rows of massive container ships stretching as far as the eye can see, just being loaded and unloaded by automated cranes working around the clock.
It's mind-boggling.
Those containers hold the components, the electronics, the raw materials that fuel the global economy. A world city must have the capacity to process physical trade on an almost unimaginable scale.
But it's not just ships either. There's internal mobility, like high-speed rail systems that allow millions of workers to move rapidly within and between these massive urban centers every single day.
Very true.
Plus, international aviation. Having a massive, hyper-efficient international airport is a vital link in the global supply chain. You can't be a world city if corporate executives, diplomats, and high-value products can't fly in and out seamlessly.
That physical infrastructure is the bedrock. But the second driver of global connectivity is what really accelerates the pace of modern globalization, and that is communication and digital systems.
Right.
Physical ships take time, but modern global markets rely on the instantaneous transfer of information.
I was looking at the notes on a specific corporate example here, and it's wild. The Nestle example. They are headquartered in Switzerland, but they're getting their cocoa from West Africa. How exactly does a world city make that kind of massive logistical juggling act possible?
It requires a level of coordination that was just impossible before the modern digital era. You have a Swiss-based corporation coordinating the purchase and manufacture of chocolate in West African nations, and then turning around to sell that final product all over the globe to places like North America and Asia.
It's a huge web.
To walk through that step by step, a crop yield is reported in West Africa. That data is instantly transmitted to a server housed in a European data center. Financial decisions are routed through a banking hub in London or Zurich to authorize payment. Logistics networks are simultaneously triggered to route shipping containers to the right ports.
So a company sitting in a boardroom in Switzerland can perfectly time a harvest in West Africa with a product rollout in an American grocery store, all because the world city provides the digital infrastructure to handle that massive flow of data.
Exactly. That complex, multi-continental operation is only possible through the highly sophisticated communication services anchored in these hubs. High-speed internet and instant international news allow heads of state and multinational corporations to make rapid decisions. When a market fluctuates in Tokyo, the financial institutions in London and New York are reacting within milliseconds.
It really makes the world feel incredibly small, but also entirely dependent on those specific digital hubs. Now, the third driver is where things shift from economics to something we all interact with every single day. Here's where it gets really interesting. Driver number three, cultural innovation and diffusion.
This is a huge one.
World cities aren't just moving shipping containers and stock prices, they are moving ideas.
Cultural trends are birthed in these cities, and then they diffuse hierarchically throughout the world. This means an idea starts at the top tier of the urban hierarchy and cascades downward to smaller cities, towns, and eventually rural areas.
The entertainment industry is the most visible version of this. The notes list three massive film industries that shape global culture. First, you have Hollywood, based in Los Angeles. Hollywood has produced the top 10 highest-grossing international films, but it's not just about box office numbers. The materials explicitly state that Hollywood is exporting American values globally.
A film is not just a product, it is a vehicle for cultural norms. It broadcasts fashion, language, humor, and societal ideals. When a world city dominates film production, it is projecting its specific cultural perspective onto the rest of the globe.
You can see this same cultural ripple effect in other parts of the world too. Look at Bollywood in Mumbai, which is an absolute global phenomenon exposing the entire world to Indian culture. And then there's Nollywood in Lagos,
Yes.
which is a rapidly growing film industry reflecting the rising influence of Nigerian culture on the world stage.
These are prime examples of cultural command centers,
Yeah.
and we see the exact same hierarchical diffusion in music.
New York City, serving as the birthplace of hip-hop, is the perfect example of this. It started as a hyper-local innovation, literally born at block parties in specific neighborhoods in the Bronx. But because New York is a premier world city with those massive communication and cultural networks we just talked about, hip-hop transitioned from a local innovation into a massive international cultural movement.
If that exact same musical innovation had occurred in a small, isolated town without access to global broadcasting networks, major record label headquarters, and international media outlets, it might never have reached a global audience. The world city acts as an amplifier. It takes local cultural sparks and turns them into global phenomena.
So we have these three drivers: the physical transportation of goods, the digital communication of data and money, and the global broadcasting of culture. Our sources synthesize all of this by explaining that these cities function within a complex architecture of global connectivity mediated by various networks.
The architecture is broadly categorized into three primary network types. First, financial networks. These are the stock exchanges and banking centers coordinating global investments. Second, transportation networks. The airlines and shipping routes facilitating the flow of goods and driving human migration. And third, digital and technology networks. The tech hubs connecting cities through high-speed data.
I want to pause here and talk directly to you, the listener, about why this matters so much. This architecture isn't just an abstract concept for geography students. It dictates your everyday reality.
Absolutely.
The price of the imported goods you buy at the store is determined by those transportation networks running out of places like the port of Nagoya. The international movies and music you stream are pumped out through the cultural networks of Los Angeles, Mumbai, or Lagos. And if you work for a large company, your job might rely on the digital networks routing decisions through financial centers in London or New York. You are living your life inside this hidden architecture.
Globalization is the framework of our modern existence. You can't separate your daily routine from the functions of these world cities.
So what does this all mean? We've talked about how powerful they are, but the materials transition into looking at the actual impacts of globalization on these urban centers, and they describe it as a dual reality.
Operating as a node in the global network provides significant advantages, but it simultaneously introduces profound, localized challenges. It is a very delicate balancing act.
Let's look at the positives first. Materials list three major advantages. The first is economic expansion. By being the hub, globalization facilitates massive job creation and concentrates incredible wealth in these areas.
Yes.
The second positive is innovation. Because these cities draw people from all over the world, you get a dense concentration of diverse populations. This mixing leads to rapid exchanges of new ideas.
That ties right back to our discussion on cultural diffusion. Innovation requires different perspectives colliding, and world cities provide the ultimate arena for that collision.
And the third positive impact is geopolitical power. Cities at the top of the hierarchy simply enjoy increased influence over international affairs. Their local leaders often have more global clout than the heads of state of entire smaller nations.
This raises an important question. What is the cost of maintaining this global dominance? The vulnerabilities are just as significant as the advantages. The influx of immense wealth and global attention creates intense pressure on the local environment.
The first major challenge identified here is socioeconomic disparity. The notes explicitly state that globalization often leads to increased income inequality and the displacement of longtime residents through gentrification.
Think about it this way. When a city becomes the command center for multinational corporations and global finance, it naturally attracts highly paid professionals from around the world. Suddenly, the local diner is replaced by a high-end bistro, and the affordable apartment building becomes luxury condos.
Right, the landscape shifts.
The city's physical space literally reshapes itself to cater to global wealth. From a systemic perspective, this prices out the working-class populations who actually keep the city running. Gentrification isn't an accident in this framework. It is a direct structural outcome of a city integrating so deeply with the highest tiers of the global economy.
It is a stark reality. The people who make the coffee, drive the transit, and clean the office buildings suddenly can't afford to live anywhere near the city they are keeping alive. And that ties directly into the second challenge listed: cost of living. The high demand for space in these world cities drives up housing costs to extreme levels. I mean, we've all seen the jokes about paying $4,000 a month for a shoebox apartment in New York or London where the oven is basically in the shower.
The spatial constraints of a physical city clash with the limitless growth of global capital. Everyone wants to be near the control center, and there's only so much land available. That tension results in the exorbitant cost of living we associate with these global hubs.
And then there is the third vulnerability, which might be the most fragile part of the whole system, market sensitivity.
Because these cities are so deeply interconnected, they are highly vulnerable to each other's failures. An international economic crisis or a market shift in one hub will instantly impact the others.
To put that in perspective, you just have to look back at the 2008 financial crisis. When Lehman Brothers collapsed in New York City, it wasn't just a local banking issue. Because of those instantaneous digital and financial networks we discussed, Tokyo and London felt the impact immediately. Global credit froze. If the financial networks in London or New York experience a sudden shock, it travels through high-speed digital lines and hits every other world city before the day is over.
The same connectivity that makes them powerful also means they share each other's risks. There is no isolation anymore. If the system catches a cold, all the world cities sneeze. The integration brings unprecedented wealth and cultural innovation, but it ensures that localized economic stability is permanently tethered to the chaotic fluctuations of the global market.
It really is a fascinating framework. Let's quickly recap the journey we've been on today. We started by learning that when it comes to the global urban hierarchy, influence beats population every time. You don't have to be the biggest metacity to be the absolute boss of the network. We explored the massive physical and digital highways that make global trade possible, visualizing the 200 million metric tons moving through Nagoya's port and the complex digital tracking of Swiss chocolate from West Africa to your local store.
We also tracked how cultural explosions rely on these cities to reach the globe, whether it's the export of American values through Hollywood, the rise of Nollywood in Lagos, or the birth of hip-hop at block parties in New York City.
And finally, we unpack that dual reality, the glittering economic and innovative highs balanced against the very real structural vulnerabilities of income inequality, skyrocketing living costs that push out working-class residents, and an extreme sensitivity to global market crashes.
Looking at all these factors together, it leaves us with an interesting prospect to consider for the future. The source material emphasizes how vital physical transportation and physical proximity have been to establishing these command and control centers. But it also highlights the increasing power of instantaneous digital communication.
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
It's something for you to mull over as you go about your day. If communication systems are becoming perfectly instantaneous and global supply chains, like our Nestle example, can be managed entirely digitally from anywhere with an internet connection,
Right.
will the world city of the future even need to be a physical place? Or are we moving toward a reality where the next ultimate command and control center is entirely virtual, floating in the cloud, rather than sitting on a piece of land in New York or Tokyo?
That is a wild thought to leave on. A world city without actual city limits. Well, we have certainly unpacked a lot today. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the source material. We hope this look into the mechanics of the global urban hierarchy has given you a new lens to view the world. Keep looking at your own city and the invisible networks connecting it to the rest of the globe with a newfound sense of curiosity. Until next time.